Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the 2021 Standards Technology Forum. Our next session is pertaining to regulatory management tools. We're going to talk about domestic and international regulations from a technology standpoint. And our next presenter is no stranger to our community. I'm sure many of you know him. His name is Dean Brewer, and I'd like to welcome him to start. So Dean, take it away.
Hi there. So how do these slides come up? Do I see my slides here eventually?
Yes, we are going to run your slides for you. Here they come.
Great. Hi, everybody. I'm Dean Brewer, and my approach to this talk is, we create standards, but how are they used? And you'll kind of see where I'm going with this. So about me, go ahead and go to the next slide. So I got into the regulation business in the late 1990s and founded a company by the name of Citation Technologies, where I had some really, really smart people. And we invented a product by the name of CyberRegs. And it was an online regulatory document library that had all sorts of features that were just state of the art back then. We sold that company, the product, CyberRegs, to IHS in 2012. And subsequently, I didn't do anything for a little while and came back and started another company by the name of Citation Compliance now, like Citation, and have a regulatory compliance service known as Citation Manage, which is doing very well in the market, primarily using regulations and breaking the regulation down to the lowest level. And that's kind of what I'll talk about with standards. I'm presently an advisor to a company by Libro, which is located in the UK and South Africa. And that's I want to say my new CyberRegs. It's incredible the technology that they have and what they're doing. Been able to gather regulations from throughout the world and putting them onto the Libro platform. And so I'm really excited about my being involved with them. And so what I'm just trying to talk about today is how, you build a standard. How is it viewed? What do people do with it? For instance, regulations are free, so I have to add value to regulations. I have to do something with them so I can sell them and make money and pay the bills. So let's go to the next slide. Next one, okay. So in the reg space, this is all about compliance. And that's where standards are important, because part of the compliance process is you have to also have standards, the regulations, anything that an organization needs to be compliant. There's tons of tools out there. So it's bringing everything together into one place where a company can say, hey, we're doing all the right things so that we're not violating any laws. So go to the next slide. So I don't need to tell you guys about standards, but the big difference between standards and regs is standards don't really change as often. We've built tools over the years, but I call it management of change. Whereas, go to the next slide on regs. Regulations, when you think about how many regulations there are in the world and how often they change, we have to build tools to manage them. And we'll talk about that too. So regulations carry the force of law. So you have to abide by them or have fines or jail, et cetera, et cetera. Next slide. So I'll let you guys, there are, in the standards industry, not all standards reference regulations. And then there are regulations that are reference standards. So we have to build tools that manage the change of the regulations. Again, those change all the time, whereas the standard doesn't. So that's why within CyberRegs, we had, how would you say, doc comparison, linking, redlining, et cetera. Go ahead, next slide. Yeah, so I'm gonna go back to when we started in the regs business. We were one of the first companies that even put regulations online. And this is back like 1996. I'm talking from a US perspective, none of the states really had websites. We would go get books, we would scan them, and we build CDs or DVDs. We'd send them out to the customers. It was just a mess. And trying to get, I remember we had to get in 2001, I think it was American Airlines, needed international regs, non-existent. So we started building international regs. We worked with the federal government, helping to put together the CFR. Kind of exciting times. And then states started putting their regs online, got really easy. So we had to come up with new ways of presenting the regs again, so that people, we came up with like doc comparison features where you compare one document to the new document and know what the changes are. We'd email alerts out saying, this has changed in the reg. This was stuff, it's real simple now. Everybody's doing this. It's all new. Redlining, we wrote an algorithm to do redlining on the fly. Kind of fun stuff. So then I remember we started, actually with IHS, we started building web portals with standards together with regs, and it did well. Go ahead, next slide. Challenges. So here's like a regulatory minefield. That's the problem. So if you think about it, all these countries, we put together 120 countries of regulations, different formats. We put them all together in the same format, 50 states, counties. I mean, it's just crazy. All different formats. And a company sitting in, say, Houston, Texas, may have to comply with 15 states, 10 countries. So you have to build some sort of software, plus you have to put the standards in there. Go ahead. So different languages. Back then, I remember we'd send out the documents to be translated. Now you have Google Translate. Things have changed to make it a lot simpler. But where I'm kind of coming from is I believe that the user needs to come to one place. You can't ask them to go to a standards platform, a regs platform, a city platform. So I'm all about building one platform to view everything. And that's kind of what we've done over time. Next, Reg. So this is a little slide to show how many regulations there really are, and it's just getting crazy. So back when I started, I wouldn't say it's doubled, but it's gone up significantly. So, and every day there's the Federal Register publishing a whole bunch of more regulations that a company has to stay compliant with. So you have to build tools that'll manage that. Next slide. So you have to start with, like in my regulatory compliance products, we do what's called an applicability review tool. So you find out what the company needs, what regulations they need. You come up with a list of regulations and then you monitor them. Well, back when we first started, nobody, the person buying standards was down the hall. The person buying regs was somebody else. Now I'm finding that it's the same person. So we're beginning to put into our compliance tools, we're beginning to put standards when they're relevant, because that's part of the complete compliance, which you have to do to totally comply. Back before software was there, people had spreadsheets they used to comply. And that, they would hire a consultant to come in, do the applicability review. You'd find out all the laws and regulations that are relevant to your facility. And all of a sudden the person would leave, and the next day, everything's technically no longer in compliance because a major reg changed. So we're building software that maintains, that manages that change. So the next day, if something does change, you can look at your compliance software and make a decision whether you want to update your tasks. So go ahead. Little slide just to show, like, if you automate everything, what happens is you potentially get poor quality content. A lot of this, we had artificial intelligence on our regs in 2000. It's just called something different. But when you automate everything, you really get poor content. And then when you have a poor infrastructure, which is all totally human beings doing everything, you get high quality content, but you just can't keep up with it because of just so many regulations. Go ahead, next slide. So anyways, I guess this is a little bit of sales in here. So it's kind of like figure out how can you manage so you're producing standards, great, but regulations are part of the issue, because what I'm trying to say is like someone's going to use standards, but they also have to be aware of the regulations in there to build a product that I guess what I'm trying to say is like regulations have to be part of your standards offering where they're referenced, vice versa. Go ahead. So when we used to build these products, when we used to build for IHS, so I'll show you some of them. We did some products for ASTM, ANSI, etc. We would display, technology wasn't what it is today. We would display the entire regulation. So you're asking some guy or woman, whoever, to read the standard, references a reg. Now you have to read the regulation. And back then, people were willing to do it. People aren't willing to read all this stuff now. They kind of want to just be told what to do. So what we've done, the way we've attacked it, is that regulation that people used to read tells you within it what needs to be done. So you break it down to the next level. So within the regulation, you're going to have a theme of the regulation, the high level requirement. You're going to have the detailed requirement, which basically is going to tell you an action. The regulation is about an oil well. Be real simple here, about an oil well. Within the regulation, it says you have to look at the oil well every 2 years. So that would be the detailed requirement, or the part of it. And then the action is look at the oil well. So that's you're able to build tasks in there, and you're able to build a task that who went out and looked at the oil well, and now you have a compliance system that works. But all about breaking that requirement down to the lowest level, action level. So that's kind of where Libreo, Citation have done. They've taken like all the laws and regulations, I shouldn't say all, but 120 countries, the US, and actually broken down all these regulations down to the lowest level. And what we do is we link from like a standard to that action. And of course, we're going to have the regulation if somebody actually wants to read the whole thing. We're going to have that available for them to look at. But what I found is the people that are buying like my type of products, they can recite the regulations backwards, forwards, and sideways. This is just a backup for them. And by breaking it down to the lowest, the action, I'm going to call it compliance task, or the action again, they are really happy with the product because they just don't want to read the regulation. And I'm sure that standards, I haven't really built, I've kind of looked at building some standard products that say we're going to, again, trying to apply the regulatory breakdown to a standards breakdown. It's kind of all the same. And so that's how these, like the compliance tools that I'm associated with are developing actions, so that, because tasking is very important now. And I'm sure this is in the standards industry, but like I say, I'm not the standards expert. I'm just about regs. So next slide. Go again. So in order to do anything with regs, you have to bring them all into a standard. Regs have a million different formats, styles. So we strive to bring all the regs onto a structured content platform where it's in the case of Libreo, it's the Libreo format, to where everything is the same. And then we can start applying our tools to it to be able to develop, like if we want to do the the doc comparison, redlining, management of change, all the things that add value. Because again, regulations are free, but we have to add value by applying tools to them. The other thing too, it's what's kind of new today wasn't so much, again, when I first started in the reg business, international regs didn't exist. And why I'm so attracted to Libreo, they started internationally and they just have such a handle on international regs where they're kind of new to the US, but that's what I've been doing. So it's a good little relationship with them. And we're finding that most companies, like I say, the guy sitting in Houston wants regs around the world. And that's why we're applying our techniques to the standards world. Kind of did a long time ago, but this is with the new technologies. Next slide. This is kind of like the benefits of structured platform. Everything's going here. Everything is the same. So somebody using it in the US and somebody using it in South Africa is going to see the same document. It's consistent. Yeah, so regulations in the US, like from the federal level, are the Federal Register is like the newspaper of the regulations. It's what's coming out. And the CFRs are where the government this is federal government, has basically said these are the new laws. So the CFRs, I think they're updated like they take what's in the Federal Register and they're codified like every so often throughout the year. And so the CFRs are basically the regulations for the US. Within each state, they have their same, is the US more complicated? I think than other countries, yes. I think the US is so complicated because you have 50 states that, based upon a legislature meeting, some meet every day. California comes out with something every day, and like Idaho, maybe every 6 months you see something. So there's just so much. And then you think of all the counties there are, and you think of all the cities. So Libreo has a very big name customer in California, and it's throughout the country. And we have to provide, it's a franchise, and we have to provide waste regulations to them. And it's a huge project because they're into so many, think of all the cities that there are in California, all the counties. So every time there's a change, it's crazy. And then you have the state of California. So everything has to be automated. But I'm going to go back to so each state kind of has a similar situation like the federal government, where they have like their Federal Register. Every state calls it something different, and then they come out with their regulations. But I'm thinking like I do actually have done a lot of work in Australia, and it's very similar to the US. But I'm trying to think, like, it's just every country is different. Canada, same thing. They have they have their national regs, and then they have every province is different. They have their own publishing thing. So it's like when you just think of the magnitude of trying to get all these regs together, it's crazy. It's like it's a lot of. So you have to structure it. You have to you put it on a platform. You make these documents look similar. That's kind of what we've done. It's crazy. But next slide. All right, so this is like some of the, this is like an old slide. So this is like, it's so funny because we invented this algorithm 15 years ago, and it's still really relevant. It's like, it's taking two documents and the old one and the new one, comparing them, and our technology actually presents the difference, calling it redlining. ASTM has this, I believe, back today. Some of you do it, but in the reg business, you've got to have this. You've got to be able to like, I wouldn't want to read this and every day. I can't see where the change is. So the computer tells me what the change is, and based upon my system, I'm able to send out, like, if this is something relevant, I can send out an email to the whoever is in charge of this particular regulation, and they can decide what to do. So this is a big deal. Redlining, management of change is what I call it, is just a wonderful thing. Like I say, it's like we wouldn't get anywhere. So like the goal in regs is to apply this throughout your entire database, all your international regs, etc. I remember, like, we were doing this for, I want to say, like, ICC, International Code Council, and there was a fire or something, and we had to find a 1937 reg that the building was built on. And when you can apply these features, it's kind of exciting. It's kind of neat, nice stuff. And I'm sure you guys have this. You're doing something like this, but this was the whole basis around cyber regs back in the day. And that's what, and still the same technology we use today. Go ahead. Next slide. So these are some of the things I'm going to talk about now. Was we would build packages with standards people where we would take the standards and actually put the regs in with the standards and sell a particular portal of just what the user wanted. So instead of like giving them choices, everything would be like, everything for 14,000 would be like right here. But it would have our features. It would have the ability to highlight the document, collaborate on it, to how I think this had high. I can't see all the features, but this is kind of like, we did really well with this stuff. And then as part of the sale, when we sold to IHS, kind of like got out of this part of the business. Next slide. Yeah, this is one we did with Leslie remembers this one because we did this with ASTM. But you can see we have in here like the ASTM documents. We had all the federal documents. Again, this is somebody who wants this information, comes to one place, uses it, and it just makes it easier for the user. So I'm all about user experience. Like we build these standards, we add value to regulations, but now we got to talk someone into using them and paying us money. And so by building these specialty portals, which we still do today, there's, I believe, a lot of, you're adding value. Next slide. Again, we're back to, this was an ASTM document that we did highlighting on. The redlining, I guess redlining is the right term that they use. So you can see how it comes out to the old one, the new one tells you what the change is. And then the computer can send out, like I say, the emails, you can annotate, you can say, hey, so-and-so needs to look at this. It was just fun stuff. Next one. So the other thing we used to do that was very successful, we would build private portals for our customers where we would take the standards, the corporate documents, the regulations, and kind of like it would be like, for instance, this is in the case of John Deere, this would be for this particular group who was having to comply with something. And this actually, the stuff sold really well. It's just a way to, I'm also about stickiness. What I mean by that is I want a customer to put their stuff on my servers, which that's a whole nother controversy back in the day, but because they're going to stay with me. If I do a good job, they're going to be more inclined to keep renewing every year. Whereas, so I've always been able to get like the corporate documents. I also would link the corporate documents to the regulations. I link them to the standards. So worked out well. Next slide. So there's another one, this is like really old, but again, you have we put protocols in there. That's a whole other thing. The commercial standards. I think we had ASTM in here. And what would happen is the companies would have the relationship with the standards organization, and we would have permission to build the portal from the standards organizations. You can see in here it has their company standards and their protocols. Again, we'd have all the regulations. And then, I mean, this was a great portal from the standpoint a company could just come there and like, wow, I have all my international regulations. I have my North American, I have all my standards. So it's like, again, it's a work tool that they just go to one place and have everything they need to do their job. So anything else here? Next slide. All right. So again, the point I'm trying to make is like, I'm presenting a user experience, bringing the regulation down to its lowest level. So no longer do you click on a link and it takes you to the regulation. I'm building portals now that take it down to the lowest level. The action, again, because no one wants to read the regulation anymore. I'm all about everything that they need to do their job is in one place, one portal. So the standards, the regulation, the company, that, and the underlying, how you build out digitally, how you build it out by having a common structure on the documents. We really couldn't. I remember back in the day, we couldn't really mess with the standards, how it was displayed. We left it in its. We had the PDF version, but then we had the citation version of it too. But that continued to look. People didn't. It's kind of funny. Like I remember, ICC, the building code inspectors, didn't believe anything that we put on the internet. They had to have their book in their back pocket, and so just all the things that we've gone through to get to today, where everybody accepts online digital standards and regulations, but it was kind of a journey. So anyway, that's pretty much everything. I could talk another 4 hours, and
Great.
I hope I made sense, in other words.
I think you did. From having worked with several standards organizations myself, I know that regulations are always at the forefront, especially for specific industries that have to adhere to regulatory compliance issues when implementing their standards. So we do have quite a few questions.
No question.
You have to, you're in the hot seat. So you mentioned the software that you've sort of evolved over the years. One of the questions is pertaining to how many lines of code are comprised in the software needed to crawl the web for codes and regulations. And I think the first two questions sort of go together because codes and regulations are changing so much, especially within specific industries. How do you keep those regulations and those codes up to date with the software that you have?
So back in the day, this is one of the, we built a product, we call it DAP. And actually we sold the license, a copy of that to IHS, and it's still being used today. It's just a series of drivers, and most of the state sites and a lot of the international sites, the federal government site, have a place you can go and you can DAP it, or you can, like I say, you go out there and you check on it every day. And every one of these is a unique driver. So it's a major pain. And of course, the states they shut you down, so you have to get a license. I mean, the complexities of this is hilarious. So you want to have a license. Then they decide to change the code like 2 weeks later. So you have to rewrite the driver. So we're presently 300 drivers approximately. So once we get the document, we bring it in, and we know we have a document in the system, right? The new document comes in, it looks at the new document, compares it to the old document. If there's no change, you're done, because then you know you have the most current regulation up there. If there is a change, then it goes into another system, and sometimes this changes spellings. But that's my point, is like it's a mess. There's so much to gathering regs because, like I said, regs change every day, and you've got to, frankly, you've got to be as accurate as possible. You've got to make sure you have the right stuff up there, because the minute people find errors, your entire credibility is gone.
Well, that's true. And to that point, so you mentioned how there are some regulations within industry that change sometimes on a weekly basis, sometimes bi-weekly. Do you think it's reasonable to expect an up-to-date platform for regulations, codes, and laws?
Yes, I do. Yes, my goal, you know, I'm a Virgo, so I'm a perfectionist. So my goal is to mirror a public, what I want to say, a state site, or whatever site, whatever the public can get to. I want to be as compliant as they are. And in some cases, we were better than the U.S. government in some cases, because we were actually involved in helping set up the CFR as it is today. And I can remember going to DC and sitting with these people. It was just interesting, but we were getting a back feed. We were having somebody come into the office like at 3 o'clock in the morning and downloading this feed. And we were actually up faster than the US government. So the point is, in regs, it's got to be perfect, or don't do it, because people are making decisions based upon that regulation. Now, of course, I'm being a little dramatic, but my point is, like, you've got to strive for it to be perfect. And it can be.
Great, thank you. So one of the questions that came in was just the difference between how regulations are managed internationally. So can you give us a little insight as to how you see regulations being managed between the US versus Canada versus Europe versus Asia?
Very, very. So this is the challenge. So in the federal, like I said, because we've been doing the US and federal government for 27 years, we started getting heavily into the international regs. And that was so hard, because a lot of countries, even today, do not, how would you say, the regs are for whatever need to be done. Like, I'm thinking Mexico, for instance. Mexico just continues to, they call NOMs. They have a NOM. And all of a sudden they just make another NOM. And they don't get rid of the old NOM. It's just like on top of that and on top of that. So we've had to, the nice thing is, you can usually, like, what we will do is we will hire somebody that's close by in the country that we're in. We'll usually hire a lawyer or a consulting firm or something to help us stay current on our international regs. The earlier thing I said about being 100% perfect applies to the US and the States. It's pretty hard to have actual, like, be totally 100% up to date for a foreign country. I'm saying, in the US, like, it's really easy, but for me to, like, stay current on China regs, which we have, it's difficult. It's hard. And like in libraries in South Africa, we really do a great job in South Africa, because it's, but you think about it, there's a lot of countries, a lot of different regions there and stuff. So what I'm saying, it just depends on the country and how current those regs are. But again, if we're as current as anybody is, like, internationally. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, we're able to do a good job managing international regulations, because nobody has it to the standard of the US. I'm talking on an overview. The UK is really good, but I'm just saying, generally the US stuff is perfect. And international is just, you do the best you can. There's just so much. And then you got the languages. You have to deal with the foreign languages, and we used to pay a ton of dough for translators. And then they had to be certified translators. So instead of charging $1 a page, it's $10 a page. It was crazy, but now you have Google Translate. It does a pretty good job. and usually the user speaks that language anyway. But I just did a big project for Mexico, and it's kind of cool. So I had to hire a consulting firm to help me update all my Mexico product. And the main problem was, you know, I don't speak Spanish. So, but I'll tell you, it came out great. Anyway, so that's, I don't know if that answers the question, but it's, the US is great. The international is as good as it can be.
I think we get that, you know, the international regulations, I think what you're saying is the international regulations have to be updated to a certain extent for you to be able to reference them into this platform.
Yeah, and the other thing I found too, so one of my tools, Citation Manage, one of my tools works based upon changes in regulations. And like when you're a customer of Citation Manage and you have what's called reviews, which means you've taken a facility in Pennsylvania and here's the laws you have to adhere to. So off of that, you've built a tasking system. So guess what? So now I'm sending you the Pennsylvania regulations change. I'm sending you a change to that regulations. People are like, Dean, turn it off. They're getting alerts like every day. And finally, so they come up with a corporate policy that says, we're okay to know that a reg changes only every month, because then we can make a decision whether we want to update our tasking system. So you have some people that just don't want to be inundated because it's all of a sudden they have to do a lot of work. I'm trying, you know, it's all about making the user's job easier. And as a result of this technology, I mean, back in the day, people would have 5 people reading the Federal Register and write things out and send it to everybody in their company. So the tools that we built have made it such that, you know, instead of like 10 people in a department, you can get by with 4 people. One of the customers we have just takes our products, and I mean, we're talking like tons and tons of users. They have like 4 people that they used to have like 5 times that in a department. And so that's why this technology is great. And so it all starts with, to me, it's building a workflow tool that everything's in the right place. And back when I started in the standards business, standards had their little platforms, and I had my little reg platforms. And I'm just saying the two have to be together today.
Great. I think as standards users, we see a lot of parallels between the way that you aggregate regulations and how some of our customers ask to use standards like the red lines on demand and things like that.
Yeah.
In your view, can you explain the difference between regulations and codes?
Okay, so like my definition of codes is just to know, I know it sounds weird, but it's really who's issuing it, who's issuing the, like municipal codes would be like in California or like lowest level. So I think to me, it's kind of like the same thing. They're all mandatory. So you'll hear like in a foreign country, they'll call it a code. In a foreign country, they'll call a regulation a standard.
Okay.
And so it just depends on where you're at. Like I said, in California, like you have municipal codes, and you have regulations. You know, it's like it's all just telling you something to do. It's telling you to do something.
So I guess in that respect, which are the biggest industries related to your work? Which ones do you see as sort of the biggest industries? And then on the flip side of that, what are some of the emerging industries that you find challenging?
Well, so this is how I met you. My claim to fame is oil and gas industry. And the reason why is because they had the biggest bucks for EH&S. They were willing to spend a ton of money to have what builds compliance tools, whereas other organizations were just really too cheap. They didn't care as much. But as you know, in the oil and gas industry, if something goes wrong, it's really bad. So that's really my tools have been built around oil and gas. Now Libro is big time in the mining industry because of South Africa. So we have probably the best mining set, how would you say, regulations known to mankind there. We're moving towards, like, I've been trying to build products for the wind energy products, let's just say, what's emerging in the US. I've been tasked to build a cannabis portals of regulations, which is incredible when you think about all the stuff that you have to do for cannabis. When they're growing, you got ICC code. I mean, you got so much involved in it, and then you're within the state. So, but like I say, my background's more in like oil and gas type. I have some couple of very large pharmaceutical companies on my platform. But the regs are the regs, and you tailor the view into my database, the view into the database based upon what the company needs for compliance, which is kind of cool. So you have to have the entire library of regulations, and then the company's only cares about 20% of it.
Gotcha. Okay, and we have one more question from ASME. Have any standards organizations or resellers asked to get a feed of codes and regulations that cite their standards for their metadata or for their own platforms?
Yeah, we've done that. Yeah. Yes.
And how do you do that?
We set up a feed. So literally every day we get, here's the initial download. Here's the regulations that are relevant to you. And then we just, some way we just every day would update it, however often they wanted it to be updated, because that would be part in that. So we've gone out and we built the database. We've gone out and let's just say the standard organization takes 20% of that database out. It's over here. When we update ours, we just send them what the updates are as often as you want.
Great. Well, Dean, I think that's all for our questions. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your presentation. So we will take a short break and come back at 11:10 to hear from AFNOR. So thank you very much, guys. We'll see you soon.